Yes, Colin, thank you very much for inviting me to come and give this presentation today to the Ashford section. And as Colin says, I am the current chair of our Climate Change Adaptation and Decarbonisation Committee. And we've been going now for just under 2 years. And I guess it was only really when I started to put these slides together that I realised myself that actually we have done quite a lot of work as a committee. So I'm very happy to share all that information with you today. So I suppose a bit of background information about how did we get going on this committee. So if you think back to 2019, the PWI became accredited through the Engineering Council in that we are able to offer a professional registration. And once you enter into that world with the Engineering Council, you suddenly get access to a lot more arenas where other engineering institutions operate. And one of those is in the Royal Academy of Engineering. And Stephen Barber, as the CEO, he started attending meetings with the Royal Academy of Engineering, and he became aware of a part of the Royal Academy, which is called the National Engineering Policy Centre. And this policy centre has a number of different work streams going on within inside it. And one of those happened to be about climate change and decarbonisation. And they were asking all the engineering institutions who would like to get involved with this work stream. So that's one thing that happened. The second thing that happened around about that time is we had the ICE presidential address from Rachel Skinner in 2020, which really went to town on climate change and decarbonisation and the role of engineers, the important role of engineers and what they can do to address all these issues. And she actually talked quite openly as well about, engineers have created a lot of these problems. So, we have a responsibility to try and fix them. So with all these sort of things going on in the background, Stephen and I took a paper to the board of the PWI in November 2020 and asked for their views on it. And they were extremely supportive, and they said, yes, the PWI should be getting involved in this subject as part of their strategic work. And then we set about trying to establish a committee. So what we did then, just before the end of 2020, we wrote out to all the corporate members and we asked for volunteers really who would like to join this committee. And we were pretty inundated with responses. So there was a lot of interest and people wanted to become members. And we tried to gather together a diverse group of people. So, people from Network Rail background, people from TfL, and people from an academic background. We've got a guy on there from the University of Birmingham. Then obviously the regulator, ORR, and then people in the supply chain. So we've got people from Mott MacDonald, Tensar, etc., D-Gauge. So they have quite a diverse range of views and experiences. And the committee has been going now, as I said, for 2 years. So some of these people are now starting to step down because they feel I've done my bit and I need to, get back to my day job. I don't have time for this. So there could be an opportunity if someone is very, very keen and wants to come onto the committee, please drop me a note afterwards or get in contact with me and we'll see what we can do about it. And the thing that does amaze me about these people is they are all volunteering. All of these people have got full-time, busy jobs with not a lot of time to spare. Yet they have all managed to do something and contribute to this committee in some shape or form, which we certainly, as the PWI, are very, very grateful for, because without them, we wouldn't have got anywhere. So once we got ourselves organised, the next thing we obviously had to do is try and work out, right, so what's this all about? What's the point of having the committee? It's not just a talking shop. For those people that know me well, they will know that I'm a doing kind of a person. And I think, yes, it's all very well to talk about ideas and get ideas and formulate ideas, but then you have to get an action plan and you actually have to deliver against that. Otherwise, it doesn't really go anywhere. So one of the first things we did was to form a terms of reference. And in our terms of reference, we tried to make it all encompassing to think about what can the PWI do for its members in this space? And what can the PWI do to get involved and influence in a more outward perspective? And we always have to think about, we are an engineering institution. What are our core values? They're all about education, about sharing knowledge, sharing expertise and experiences, encouraging debate, getting people to talk about things, and lifting up the profile of something. So that sort of sits as a key tenet underneath our decarbonisation committee work. And obviously we created our own vision and mission statements as well, which I think are important for people so they understand the direction of travel and what we're actually trying to do and trying to achieve. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time just talking about the outward focus type of work that we do. As I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of that is associated with the Royal Academy of Engineering. I think there are 43 engineering institutions altogether, representing about 500,000 engineers in the UK. And they've obviously all got a voice and very important things to say. And when the government now are asking about policy decisions around engineering, they will go to the Royal Academy of Engineering through probably the NEPC, the Policy Centre, and they would ask them, they could ask them questions, they could ask them the opinions, or they could ask them their thoughts on what policy they're thinking of implementing. So I could give you one example. So when COVID was at its height, Professor Valence, he came to the Royal Academy of Engineering and he asked them to go off and investigate about ventilation in existing buildings. And obviously the PWI weren't involved in that piece of work, but that is the kind of thing that they may get involved with. And then they put feelers out to the different engineering institutions, find the one that is the most suitable to undertake that piece of work and ask them to get involved. So coming back to NEPC and net zero, they had this net zero working group, which they just started in January. So they were finding their way. And a lot of their initial thoughts were around coming out of COVID and what could they do around this net zero. And since that time, it has changed quite dramatically, the type of work that they do. And I would have to say, like Peter Dearman, our president, he has been absolutely fantastic at getting involved with this group, because Peter is very knowledgeable. He's an expert in his field. And as you can imagine and appreciate, a lot of the work that this net zero working group have been doing, particularly in this last 12 months, has all been around about the energy crisis and finding alternative means of providing energy. And Peter, with his electrification background, has just been perfect fit for that. So you can see there on the right-hand side of the slide, the key outputs that this group have actually produced. So you've got a series of reports. There's also consultation responses to different government requests. And then they publish some stuff on media, which we do use whenever we can as the PWI. So for example, there's a report there on the role of hydrogen in a net zero energy system. And if you want any bedtime reading, you could go and have a look at that. But you'll see in there that Peter Dearman is actually credited in that report, as are the PWI as contributors to that piece of work. Similarly, Peter has been involved in the consultation responses there. You can see there's one called Chris Skidmore's Independent Review of Net Zero Delivery. So Chris Skidmore is an MP, and he was asked by the government to lead an independent review of net zero delivery, particularly thinking about what is affordable and achievable for businesses. And Peter has been involved in that as well. So he has really been a fantastic contributor for us as the PWI, and getting our name, if you like, in there with the Royal Academies, because we are only a little engineering institution compared to some of the others. And the other thing that we've used, which the NEPC published, are those Getting to Net Zero video series. I don't know if you've seen those. We put them in the journal, made reference to them in the journal maybe 2 journals ago. And they're a really great series of video explainers. They might only last for, say, 5 minutes, but I think they're a fantastic tool to use. Maybe, say, if you were having a team meeting and you wanted something to start off a conversation, they'd be a very good tool to just show the video and then start to generate a conversation around that. So, I would say they're there for people to use. You can access them either through the Royal Academy website, or I think even on the PWI website now too, if you want to use those. And then the continuing work that's ongoing with this NEPC Net Zero Working Group, there's two things. One of them is about enabling a net zero compatible grid. And again, because Peter has all the experience of electricity, he is involved with that, which is going to be a series of roundtables, which will be super for the PWI. And the second piece of work is about materials and net zero. So obviously we on the railway use a lot of high carbon materials, and currently the NEPC are just at the stage of sort of scoping out this project and thinking about what they want to do. But one of the things they said at their last meeting was they're looking for case studies. So I immediately got my little brain going in there, and I said, haha, I remember whenever we were at the conference in Manchester, and again the conference in Bristol at the end of last year, we had William Manwaring, who gave a presentation on the composite sleepers, which I'm sure you're all aware of, the side cut sleepers. So we sent off that presentation and said, would you like to use this as one of your case studies? And the guys in the NEPC team are currently thinking about that. So all these things help to get the PWI more established within the broader world of the Royal Academy of Engineering, which is good for us as an organisation. And then again, probably looking more at an outward focusing thing, we know the government have published some documents about decarbonising transport, and the areas where the PWI could put their focus is active travel, modal shift, if you like, thinking about that, and decarbonising how we get in our goods. So thinking about, you know, the use of encouraging freight and how could we help with that. And I suppose by serendipity, one of the strategic objectives of the last few years has all been about encouraging more people from electrification discipline to join the PWI. And obviously, we all know that one of the ways in which the railway is going to decarbonise is through electrification. And focus on electrification has become very important for us over the last few years, and I'm sure you've all seen that. And that, again, is there's a crossover there between the work the Electrification Committee do in helping in encouraging people from that discipline to become members, and the work that we can do as the committee. Okay. So that's sort of like more on the outward focused things. Now I'm going to just talk a little bit about the things that we're doing more towards for our members. So over the last 2 years, we have run quite a lot of lunch and learn events around this subject. We've had speakers from Network Rail, from TfL, from the supply chain, all talking about their company 2050 strategies and how they're going to get there. And again, this is just a means of sharing information and generating ideas and debate amongst groups of people. I was looking through the journals over the last, probably since about mid-2021, and we have actually contributed a lot of articles to the journal. I can recall one from S&C Lavalin, from Mo, who sits on the committee. They did an article on using the carbon tool on one of their projects, in a design project. We've had articles on the cost challenge of electrification and how you can design more efficiently to save money. We've had an article on weather resilience from the Network Rail weather team, and they had also actually given a presentation about that at one of the technical seminars, so that then was repeated in the journal article. So this is all a means of communicating with people, making people aware of what's going on across industry. And all those articles obviously then get shared onto the Knowledge Hub, on the PWI's Knowledge Hub, so that they're for everyone to look at as time goes on. A few other things we've got involved with as a committee. The Great British Railways call for evidence. There was a question in there about environmental sustainability. And between some of the fellows of the PWI, some of the members on the committee, we pulled together a response for that question. And people were very helpful and able to provide a lot of information, good evidence, that we could respond on that call for evidence. And I think those responses, again, are all on the PWI website if you're interested in having a look at those. And last year, we had our first award for the PWI's Climate Change, Adaptation and Decarbonisation Award. That's quite a mouthful. And we have agreed now to change the name of that award to Sustainability Award for next year, which I think will make it a bit easier to explain. But we had 5 papers were submitted for that competition. And of course, all those papers have to be reviewed by people against set criteria, and we'll have to arrive at a winner. So there's quite a lot of volunteer work involved with that, which people on the committee all got involved with that. And we did have a winner. The winner was the group from GeoBear, who produced a paper about using geopolymer injections to repair concrete level crossings rather than having to take them all out. So that was quite a good solution. And the papers, the first, second and third place papers will appear in the journal in due course, so you will be able to read those. A few other things just going to talk about that are going on within the committee, and this sort of shows you like the diverse range of things that we'll get involved with. So back in 2020, the Engineering Council upgraded the UK spec for professional registration. We're at version 4 now. And one of the key changes in those requirements is all around about people who are coming for professional review being able to demonstrate their understanding, their evidence, their experience around this whole competence E3 about sustainability. So you can see on the screen there how the Engineering Council have described what they're expecting to see. And underneath that, you can see the words the PWI have generated for themselves and set their expectations. And what we are doing in our group is we are looking at what would a good answer look like. So what our professional registration manager has seen in recent years is that people who are applying for professional registration and trying to demonstrate evidence against this competence do struggle. So not only do the candidates struggle to provide correct type of evidence, but also reviewers struggle to understand what does good look like. So our group, a small number of people within the committee, are actually looking at what does good look like, and they are trying to produce exemplar responses both to help candidates who are applying for professional registration and also to educate reviewers into what good looks like. Other things they're looking at is what is a suitable scoring system. So in the PWI professional review process, each of the competences has a score. I think it's from 0 to 4. And for something like safety, you must score a minimum of 3. And we are considering in our committee, should sustainability be on the same footing? Should it also have a minimum score of 3? Are safety and sustainability equal? And one other thing they're considering is, should the responses that the people give, whatever job you're doing, whether you're a designer, whether you're a contractor out working on site, whether you're working in the ORR or there's some kind of regulatory body, can you explain the aspects of your work that relate to sustainability and how they would then feed back to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals? And that might be a step too far for the PWI, I don't know, but that is something that is under consideration. So we'll watch this space on that one and see how that carries on. But those people are under a bit of pressure now to finish that off. That piece of work needs finishing. And then, of course, when we started this committee, there's lots of things that you don't know, and people come along and get interested in it, that you've no idea who they are at the beginning. And one such person is a chap called Richard Hill. Now, Richard is a chap who works for Network Rail, a gentleman who works for Network Rail, and he is very, very passionate about this whole subject of decarbonisation and climate change. And he approached me probably before we had our first technical conference on this subject matter, and asked if he could get involved because he would like people to understand what their own carbon footprint is. And whenever we are able to, we do give Richard, a 5 or a 10-minute slot so that he can speak about the thing that he is very passionate about. And he has provided us with all these different websites that you can use to understand your own carbon footprint. So his argument is that, maybe you can't do something very big, but you can certainly do something to to manage your own carbon use and footprint. And that's a good place to start, take responsibility for yourself, which I think it is very good. So if you get a chance, have a look at those websites, look at your carbon footprint, and maybe think, one of your plans for the year is, how can I reduce that down a bit? A few other things that have gone on. So maybe not the last meeting, but the meeting prior to that, we had a presentation from Gareth Dennis, who works for Arcadis, and he's very passionate about sustainability and ethics and how do these two things fit together. And Colin, you were saying at the beginning, you're always on the lookout for good presentations. So this is a really good presentation. And I would actively encourage you to invite Gareth to come and give this presentation to your section, because it is quite thought-provoking, and there's a bit of fun in it as well, but it does have a serious message. So for example, in his presentation, Gareth is talking, he gives an example of, say, a project where you're looking at train and platform interface. And obviously, I guess the best thing everyone wants to have is level access, because then all users will be able to get on and off the train easily. But we all know in the real world which we work, that on some projects that is not possible to achieve for all sorts of reasons. It could be because of money, because of time, because you have too many different types of trains running in and out of platforms or whatever, and it would all be too difficult. But Gareth looks at it from the perspective of, you're an engineer, and what does sustainability mean to you? Does it mean, for example, that whatever you do today, it's going to last for many, many years, and therefore is part of your responsibility to argue more loudly for level access? And that is just one of the kind of examples that he uses in his presentation, and it is quite thought-provoking. So definitely, Colin, I would recommend that you invite Gareth along to give that presentation. And another presentation that we received quite recently, it was from Darren Sharp, who's working in the Technical Authority and Network Rail. And again, another good presentation for this group to listen to. And Darren's obviously working in a central team in Network Rail. He has come up with a small group of people within that technical authority, the type of, he's calling it a 10-point track decarbonisation action plan. And obviously in the role that Darren is in, he doesn't have any money. He doesn't have any technical authority, if you like, over the work that goes on out in the routes or in the regions. But somehow he's got to be able to influence and work with people like Track Rams to get them to maybe embrace some of these ideas for their CP7 portfolio of work. So that is a very difficult challenge. And he's been asking us in our committee, is there anything that we could get involved with here, and how could we help? Which I think we are going to, yes, we're going to get involved with there's some guidance notes I think we've agreed to take on our committee. So again, that's another good presentation to listen to. And what I'm interested now is to get some of the views from this group. So in this year now, we start to develop ideas for the PWI strategic plan for 2028 to 2024 to 2028 and beyond, things that will be implemented. And what we're doing currently is we're just starting off a consultation process where we're asking stakeholders and the membership, where do they think the PWI should be going in the next 5 years? And we've developed a series of questions to put to different audiences to help gather thoughts and views. And one of the questions that we're asking is all around this whole thing about, big problems that are threats to human society, I guess. So one of them is obviously decarbonisation, climate change adaptation and sustainability. Another area is about diversity and inclusion. But I would really like your views on question number 1. So if you think about, first of all, do you think there are other areas of wider societal concern that the PWI should be focusing on, aside from those two? And how do you think our committee could work better, especially with the sections and the wider membership, to help get messages across? How could we better be joined up as a PWI organisation? So interested to get your views on that. And that, I think, is my final slide, Colin. Really, it's a conversation now.
So first off, thanks.
Would you be happy if I take the slides down, or do you want me to leave that one up?
Completely up to you, Joan. No problem. Leave it there. Leave it there.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you for that. And I will reach out to Gareth as well to see if we can get him booked in. But I think speaking, and we have a question in the chat which I'll come to in a second. But I think to make sure it's top of mind, because these topics, whether you want to call it decarbonisation, sustainability, environmental, these topics are not going to go away. This is, on everyone's agenda. So I think whenever we have a PWI meeting, a physical meeting, then I think there should be time allocated in the agenda for either an update or an insight or a development along those lines. And I think that way it will keep it top of mind. That's just my initial reaction.
Okay. Be doing. Sorry, I can't see the people now.
Yeah, so just jump in, trying to find my microphone probably.
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks for the presentation, Joan. Joan, just the question I put is how any bits that you find in the working group, how they disseminated back to industry. So I work for Mott MacDonald as an electrification engineer. How are you, or how do you intend to feed those bits back? Say in the first quarter, you've identified there's the X amount of key factors in terms of whether it's carbon or impacting social, environmental sustainability. Is there like kind of a bulletin of top finds and ways you've found to design around them?
Right, good question. And I would have to be honest and say the only way that we have communicated back to the membership at present is on a regular basis is through the journal. Really, that is the only way that we've done that. And we haven't done anything, as you're suggesting, like, create a bulletin. Last week we had a bit of a conversation in our committee meeting, and what is probably a bit of a failing on us, if we're honest, is on the PWI website, we don't even have a page of our own saying, these are the things that we're working on, this is what we found out, the kind of thing that you're talking about. So that was actually one of the actions that we took, was to get a page set up on the website and post information on there, which I think would probably be quite helpful to people. That would you think that would be a place where you would look?
Yeah. Say if I'm designing something, I've found a hotspot of carbon or an environmental issue, if there's anything that might already be being looked into on there, or just generally out of interest, if there's challenges that the PWI and its group have found, and it's kind of an open question to the industry of we've got this problem, and can anyone help solve it? And someone might come, oh yeah, there's this material we've got extensive use, or there's this environmental mitigation method that we use. Somewhere to count as a forum for almost collaborative ideas.
Okay, I have to give that some thought. I mean, some of the things that have come up on some of the lunch and learns have been quite interesting, and I'm particularly thinking about a presentation. It was given by the corporate member called Green Fix, but the product was about kind of a stabilization material, and the person who was giving the presentation was actually in America, and we had people on that call like from all around the world. And I remember the guy saying to me afterwards, he said, I cannot believe the amount of questions that I have been asked about, how do you use this product for sustainable solutions? So it really generated a lot of a conversation. But then that is not Well, the recordings are available and put on the website. But if you didn't know that, if you weren't at that presentation, how would you really know that? So
Yeah.
maybe one of the things is we do have to do is have this page on the website where we post things on there and direct people better. Would be an idea.
I think that would make sense, Joan. If there's an area of the website purely designed for this topic, I think that would be good. And you could also multiply it out in the journal and have, you know, a few pages allocated to sustainability and the stuff around it, because then it's top of mind. I know you need content for that, but as this thing grows, I mean, all the tier ones, NR, even the regional accounts, this is a hot topic. So I'd like to think the information's there.
Okay. Thanks for that feedback. Thank you.
We've got a
Oh,
question. Sorry, Sam, did you want to say something else?
Just to put it into context, and myself as a designer, say if I'm doing some carbon accounting and I realise that the overhead line masts are my hotspot in terms of carbon for my scheme, it'd be great to kind of go to the industry in some kind of forum and say, how can I reduce the carbon in this, whether it's the transport of it or the material, and see if there's others having the same issue, and maybe start either getting to a solution or creating a pressure group to go back to Network Rail saying, how can we procure steel better, as an example.
And did you say, Sam, that you worked for Mott MacDonald?
Yes. Yeah.
So I presume that in there you've probably got quite a lot of active people as well, you know, internally within your organisation.
Yeah. Definitely. So I'm the sustainability lead for rail, but I've got a huge communication with the rest of our kind of transport unit, so even outside of rail and beyond. So there's quite a few of us.
Okay, or you know, the other thing that the PWI, I'm just thinking as you're speaking there and listening to what you're saying, the other thing that the PWI have started to do is, for more technical problems, it is set up, you know, specific working groups to try and solve problems. Where maybe we could change our committee slightly so that it became more of that type of a forum, or it could be an offshoot of the committee. Okay, you've certainly given me some things to think about.
Bill, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Sam. I think, you know, the two key materials, if we're talking about you know, construction of railways, concrete and steel, and there's certainly been some addressing of the concrete topic, but I haven't seen anything with steelwork, so that would be interesting. We have a question from Mark. Mark, did you want to speak to Joan directly?
No, all of us. Hi, my name's Mark Banks. I'm from the Thames Valley. And I know Darren quite well, and I had a chat with him a couple of weeks ago about issuing a problem statement. Now, I work on the Northern Powerhouse Rail, and we're in like the design optioneering stage. And and Gareth is one of the PEs through Arcadis, is working on Northern Powerhouse Rail in the same team as me. And I'll ask him, because we have a weekly Thursday morning meeting about things, and I'll ask him to have a bit of a chat about sustainability. From what you say,
Definitely.
So he'll be a bit of a topic to talk about. We have a bit of a catch up with the engineers. Now, I had a chat with Darren, and he said, well, perhaps we should have a chat, me and him, about making like a problem statement, because I'm normally involved with grit 5 to 8 rather than 1 to 3. And of course, I said to him about, obviously we're looking about in a previous role, we had long wheel timbers, and we're going for composites and the expense and how difficult it is, but obviously the longevity of them and stuff like that. And what I was going to say is the fact that we almost need to go from a wider from a PWI point of view, a wider forum to say we're going to do this going forward. And like the previous one with regard to the masks and the sustainabilities, should be saying to suppliers, we need to make sure you're have a certain, I know, some limits or emissions, for example. If you're related to cars, they need to be a certain level down, otherwise we won't bother entertaining using you, and putting a bit of onus on them to supply it. I don't procure any any materials relating to the PWA at all, whether it's the sleepers, the rail, the masks, or anything. And I don't know from an engineering perspective whether we're doing enough from a wider audience. Should we be putting more onus on the suppliers to make sure that they're thinking forward, so that what we use going forward is sustainable?
They're very good points that you're raising there. And you know, so suppliers' behaviours changes, doesn't it, when procurement people say this is what you have to do. So you know, somehow we have to get the procurement people to change maybe terms of tenders, etc., to say these are now the rules of the game. And really, we were having this conversation the other day as well about, you know, if they ORR put more pressure on Network Rail, or for example, or changed the way that reporting tools are used. So instead of saying, right, they're really focused on unit rates, which of course they are always going to be for delivered work. But instead of that, if they were saying things like, and we also want to know, like, what is the carbon content of your solution? I think if you had things like that happening in the industry, that would drive a massive change, and people would think about this a lot more and start to take it more seriously. So it is a bit of an uphill battle at the minute, but I guess you've got to keep talking about, haven't you? And you've got to keep bringing it to the fore. And eventually things change, and change does happen, even if it takes a long time.
I think the thing is, sorry,
carry on. You go on.
All I was thinking of is, rather than it being an appendices of a conversation, of an agenda, it should be one of the first things that you talk about, whether it's with procurement companies, companies that supply through the procurement process. But we should be saying, oh, one of the first things we need to worry about is what's the sustainability of the product you're bringing to the railway.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But the theoretical position, it is fantastic, isn't it? But if you're a RAM and you've only got a certain amount of money to spend in your budget, and you have to make it last for 5 years, and you've got to get all these jobs done, they're really difficult trade-offs, aren't they? So I suppose that for people who are not in that position, who are not the purse holders, it's very easy to take that, you know, the perfect position. But that per person who's in the RAM role, they have to balance off all these things, the trade-offs.
Definitely.
And it's hard. And that's why I think, like, that the plan that Darren's put together for the, you know, the 10-point plan, track decarbonisation plan, if a RAM could maybe choose, like, I don't know, 1, 2 or 3 of those things on that list and say, right, I'm going to focus for these in CP7, it's better than where we are now.
Well, I've tried in my previous role on Wessex to get the latest Excalibur screw bolts, and I'd used Darren for support in terms of the trials and everything else. And I had a uphill struggle with not so much the RAMs but the TMEs, because I was looking at something that's harder for them to change their mindset. But once you install the new Excaliburs, because I've been dealing with John Stevens as well, to have trials and demonstrations, because once they go in, they're a bit more expensive, but you can use a battery powered handheld screwdriver as opposed to having a bance, which is obviously chucking out fumes and everything. And of course, after so many, you lose that production. And of course, I had so many problems, and I had my engineering director saying he'll support and everything else to push the mindset of the maintainer. But like you say, they've got to keep the railway operational. They've got to focus their limited budget on just keeping things going, not necessarily to look outside the box and think of something that might cost more on a daily basis, but will you know. And I've said to them before, said it's the same with wheel timbers. When we put in composites, it costs more money, but 3-4 years down the line, you won't have to go back there again.
Yes. I mean, I agree with everything that you're saying, but change is hard, and you know, you just have to keep saying what you believe in, I think, and trying to convince people to change. Just on that wheel timber thing you're speaking about there, at the last technical seminar that we had, there was a chap came over from Irish Rail, Colin Heatherly, and he gave a fantastic paper on a wheel timber situation that they had somewhere in Ireland. Can't remember the location of the place, and how they decided to go for a composite solution. If you're interested in that, that presentation should be available on the PWI website. If you're interested in having a look. In fact, it's probably recorded.
I think from the point of view, Joan, of going forward, that composites in wheeled timbers, and like when in my previous job, we made sure that we put all the wheeled timbers in, for example, Waterloo Station, because there's no sun, it's always damp, and then once they're in, you don't have to worry about them degrading within within years. And it is, as you say, it's an uphill struggle, because on a yearly basis, the TMEs have got a budget, but we're looking for 5, 10 years, 15, 20 years ahead, but they haven't got the money to spend that money on a daily, on a current yearly budget.
Yeah.
I think it's all an interesting conversation when you think about, it's not the material cost, it's the overall installed cost, because labour is typically going to be your biggest overhead. But of course, life in service is another topic. Certainly it should be considered, but when you try and balance that on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis with budgets,
it's very hard. Very hard.
The thing is, I try to get to the TMEs is the fact that 6 months down post installation, you'll be walking through doing your monitoring, your patrolling, and you won't even stop at a site, for example, that used the new Excaliburs, and you won't be carrying bances around with you, and you'll be you won't get the degradation of the manual person. After a certain while, they slow up, and it's just one of those things that, like you say, Colin, is that people can't foresee, but they can't move their budget beyond their current year, and they know what they need to do. They know the problem spots they've got on their patch, and they're just trying to deal with that. And it is going to hard one, but it's got to happen, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it is not just the construction. It is everything. So it's the methodology. For example, I'm a senior oil engineer, and every time I'm dealing in a project, I try to look for efficiencies in the way of construction to reduce the number of people, machines to achieve the same work, and it's impossible because people are just focused on timing. And at the end, we finish with 20 machines on track with the impact in the carbon on doing nothing. Most of the time, it's just a couple of erection of steelwork, and that's it. Or using a massive cranes because we just don't design properly, and we factor with a coefficient of safety that is massive. So my background in Europe is working in a different way. We don't use trucks. We just a train, a hops train. It reduced the impact. The people are working just with one machine instead of 20 machines on track doing the same again and again.
Yeah, it's a very different culture here in Miguel, isn't it? You can hear the frustration in your voice.
I think it's okay. I'm trying to learn the culture.
You must keep the culture that you brought to this country and say, no, don't do it that way, do it this way.
Yeah. I have plenty of enemies. I don't want to have more.
Good. Okay, is there any other questions for Joan while we have her?
I think, Colin, you've got Peter Derman coming, haven't you? Maybe the next meeting? March, is it? All right. So Peter will obviously speak about the subject as well, because he's very passionate about it. So yeah, make sure you've got plenty of thoughts for him too when he's here. Have a good debate with him.
Good stuff. Okay, well look, on behalf of the Ashford section, Joan, thank you for a very insightful and educational presentation. So thank you very much for that. I'm sure the audience enjoyed it, and obviously we'll get it uploaded as soon as possible. And then just for the audience, just as a gentle reminder, our next meeting in February is on the 21st, starting at 3 p.m. and it's Dave Mansfield from London Overground presenting his paper on Barking Riverside, and it'd be great to see you all to join us on that as well. So thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks again, Joan.
Thank
And I'll
you, Colin. I
speak to you
really,
soon.
really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks, everyone. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.